Bob Sorge, E., served as president of our Rotary Club from 2005 to 2006 and has worked in the nonprofit field in Madison for 26 years. Bob is celebrating his 10th anniversary as president of the Madison Community Foundation this year, and he's going to tell us about the trends in philanthropy at national, state, and local levels, and tell us about a few individuals who have shaped our community through philanthropy. We look forward to your presentation, Bob, and we've made a contribution to the Rotary International Polio Plus Fund as a way to say thanks for speaking to us today. As usual, if you have questions, if time permits, please wait for one of the audience microphones because this program is being recorded, as John Bonsidville told us. Thank you and welcome, Bob.
Well, as much as I'd like to take credit for being related to our UW-Madison quarterback, it's Sorge. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, President Donna, for the very kind introduction. Let me just take those off. One thing I want to do is I want to do a shout out right away to our Rotary Youth Exchange program. When I was president of our club in 2005, 2006, we hosted a foreign exchange student, and then we did a couple of years later. And whether you're hosting or whether you're just entertaining, it's really a great opportunity for these kids and for your family. My two sons got a lot out of it. So thank you. As I served in 2005 and in 2006, I have to say it's a bit risky to have a past president up here at the podium. I mean, we've all seen Melanie at the podium, in fact, I was sitting there and I was listening to the rounding up and I was thinking, I turned 50 this year. I've been in this club 20 years, and so I've been rounding up for 18 to 100, and I should be rounding down, but so I promise I'll keep my remarks to 90 minutes or less. If anybody sees me going along, just kind of do one of these and I'll be okay. In all sincerity, it was a wonderful honor to serve as president of this club in 2005, 2006, and it is an incredible honor to serve as your community foundation's president at Madison Community Foundation. People come up to me all the time and they thank me for the wonderful work of the Community Foundation. Oh, you know what? I need my clicker. They come up and they thank me all the time for the wonderful work of the Community Foundation, but the Communities Foundation is really just a reflection of those people who love this community, want to see it get better, and want to give to make it do so. And so let me show you a couple of those pictures. It's not surprising that a handful of those people are fund holders at the Community Foundation, and of course they're also Rotarians. But this is just a subset of all the people and all the connections that are both Rotarians and part of the Community Foundation. So I'd like to give you a sense of that, and I would ask a couple of people to stand. First, if you're a member of our current board of directors, I'd like to ask you to please stand. In addition, I'd like our past board members to stand. We have several of them here. We have several fund holders, Legacy Society members, and agencies with endowments at the Community Foundation. If you could please stand. And then we have some very special guests as well. The staff of the Madison Community Foundation, Diane Baldwig is standing as the chair of our Board of Governors. Jane Coleman is walking in as our former executive director. And I want to thank all of you for what you do for Rotary, for your Community Foundation, and no doubt in many, many other ways in our community. These are the first faces of philanthropy that I'm going to share today. This year, we're celebrating the 75th anniversary of the creation of the Madison Community Trust Fund, which is the predecessor to the Madison Community Foundation. I'm going to share a little bit about that in just a minute. And speaking of predecessors, I want to recognize Jane again and Carol, Carol Toussaint. Kathleen White is also one of my predecessors. What you may not know is I have two other predecessors. They both happen to be men. They both happen to be named Bob. I'm not kidding. And neither lasted more than a year. I'm 4 years in. I think the hex is off. So, I want to thank you, Jane and Carol, for being here today. Of course, Carol's here every Wednesday, but I'm assuming she came today just to see me. So thank you very much. I'm really lucky to have the opportunity to serve in this role, and am fortunate to follow three people who have done an amazing amount for our community, both professionally and personally. And I'm, of course, talking about Jane, Carol, and Kathleen. They're all fund holders. They're all Legacy Society members at the Community Foundation. They're all still active as volunteers for the Community Foundation. I am the only one getting paid. And so I want to thank you for taking the time to be here. Let me give you two key slides on the Community Foundation. And then I'm going to talk about philanthropy at the national, state, and local levels, followed by some examples of how philanthropy has impacted our community. So this first slide shows a question I often get, and this definition on the screen comes from the Council on Foundations. It's all true, but it sort of fails to capture the nuances of Madison Community Foundation. As you can imagine, when I became president, I met with a lot of people. I'm talking over 200 people one-on-one, stakeholders of the Community Foundation, and I just wanted people to tell me what the unique value of the Community Foundation was. A distant theme, I'll say, was that they wanted us to be at the heart of the community. We're moving downtown at the end of September, so you'll see us down here. But their responses ranged across a whole wide array of themes, but the top three, none of which are included in here, are that people value the independent objectivity of the community foundations. In other words, we don't produce programs, and so it enables us to make arm's length decisions about the funding we provide. The second thing is that they value our knowledge of the community. The broad knowledge, I can tell you there are 4,300 nonprofits in Dane County, there are 2,600 501c3s, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they value that, and they value it as an alternative to commercial gift funds, which don't know anything about Madison, certainly don't know our nonprofit community, and are not giving here. And the third thing they're interested in, this is not a surprise, is that the permanent nature of our endowments. People want to leave a legacy for a community they love, and they want to give back for generations, even after they're gone. 94% of our assets come from endowed funds, so our grants come from endowments, the earnings on endowments versus annual gifts. The second slide tells you a little bit of our story. The Madison Community Trust Fund was originally formed in 1942, and it developed as part of a broader effort to bring structure to the charitable giving sector during World War II. At that time, community leaders were concerned that the war might cause a depression, and they thought that establishing a community trust would cushion against the potential negative impact of giving during such a depression. On the screen, there's an image of an early reply device for the Madison War Chest campaign, and this is one of the ways that they coordinated giving. If you could read it, you'd see several familiar names still operating in our community today, such as Attic Angel, the Humane Society, Neighborhood House, St. Mary's Hospital, and others. You'd also see some unfamiliar names, but really important names to our community. So, for example, Methodist Hospital became Meritor Hospital, became Unity Point. Madison Community Union is now our United Way of Dane County. Our history with these organizations goes back decades, and nearly all of them have endowments at the Community Foundation. So I want to take a little bit of a step back and look at the broader picture. It's always interesting for me to see how the images are used to convey philanthropy. They almost always include people and nature. Go back to your office, Google it. You'll be amazed at how many include those two things, people and nature. I pulled these three images on the screen the other day. One of them you might recognize. And regardless of the actual image, all convey this idea of nurturing, sort of as a garden nurtures a garden. And of course, in the Community Foundation's case, we nurture Madison. So you see, we've got hands holding up not only the state capitol, but the environment around it, whether you're talking the lakes or the communities or whatnot. I really feel like philanthropy is truly one of the most freeing activities any of us can participate in. You know, I don't need a license to help somebody out, but I do need one to ride my bike down a trail in Dane County. Nobody tells me how much to give and when, but if I want to put my brush out on the curb, it has to be 4 feet or less, but longer than 18 inches. It has to go out on the right day. And if it is shorter than 18 inches, that's a different pile on a different day. And if I fail on both of those, I'm paying for it. And, there's good reasons for all of these things, but it just always reminds me how complicated our lives can be and how easy changing somebody's life can be. So it's an immense privilege to have the opportunity to do what I do every day. So I'm going to give you some statistics here. Back in the 60s, philanthropy was somewhat unique to the United States, but it's not quite as distinctive today. Today, if you look at America's rank, it depends on what you're measuring. Are you measuring dollars or volunteerism, or even they have one measure that's willingness to help a stranger in need. But regardless of the form, the U.S. always ranks in the top 10%. In 2015, the World Giving Index ranked the United States second, and indeed, we're an extraordinarily generous country. I'm curious, can anybody tell me what the total amount of non-defense discretionary spending was in the United States in 2016? Non-defense discretionary budget. Anybody? Just a guess? It was $518 billion. Does anybody want to guess what charitable contributions in the United States totaled last year? $390 billion. So when you take a look at this, U.S. citizens gave freely to charity nearly as much as the entire federal government had to spend on an annual basis. I think it's incredible, and that gap continues to narrow. Thank you very much, Warren Buffett and the Giving Pledge. Over the next half century, Americans will give $20 trillion to charity. To me, that's an amazing statistic. And here's another statistic that I think it'll be a surprise, perhaps, maybe stun those of you who don't have a lot of faith in today's youth. In 2015, millennials gave, 84% of millennials gave to charity. They were only surpassed by the greatest generation, who gave 88%. Dropped off a little bit by the baby boomers, down to 72%. And my generation, Generation X, was as self-absorbed as you said, because we gave 59%. We sort of provided the floor for that. But to me, that gives me a whole lot of faith in the future of our country when we have so many people who are interested in giving, so many younger people in particular. Unfortunately, Wisconsin is not a bright spot in philanthropy. Again, it depends a little bit on what you measure, but studies in 2012, 2014, and 2015 by respected institutions who are on the screen placed Wisconsin in the bottom 10 states, ranking Wisconsin 44th overall. In 2012, the Chronicle of Philanthropy noted we gave 3.4% of our discretionary income to charity, and Utah gave 10.6%. So we've got a ways to make that up. These are not fine nuances. They're actually quite big gaps. And if you remember willingness to help a stranger in need, I included that because that was a bright spot for Wisconsin. We ranked 9th overall. When you get to the Madison area, we are stronger than the state. 34% of tax returns in Dane County showed charitable contributions last year. That ranks us 5th out of the 72 counties in Wisconsin. And there are so many faces of philanthropy in Madison. I was having a hard time figuring out who I was going to feature on the slide. And to be honest, if I was featuring this just based on demographics, Bob and Erwin would be Diane and Judy, because women are far more likely to give. They're likely to give in larger amounts, and they're likely to give with less recognition. But I picked Bob and Erwin because I'm anticipating many of you know about the magnificent announcement on Monday. The Goodman Foundation gave $10 million to help Madison College build the Southside campus. American Family added 1.3 to that, but what a magnificent gift to our community by the Goodman brothers. So, I know Jack Daniels is here, but I don't have there he is. Congratulations, Jack. We're all really excited about the Southside campus and appreciate your leadership in getting the school there. So. But I also wanted to honor, when I was thinking about, so Bob and Erwin and the Goodman Foundation did this phenomenal thing, many thanks to E.G. Schrampka, of course, here in 2017. But I also picked them because they represent a lot of what I see in our community around philanthropy. Of course, they're genuine good people that want to do the right thing. pretty much you don't get people in philanthropy that don't fall into that category. Second, they supported a wide variety of things in the community. We see this all the time. They were deep supporters of the Rotary Club of Madison. They were important supporters of the Madison Community Foundation, United Way of Dane County, UW, many organizations. Becky is sitting at the front table here. Of course, we have the Goodman Atwood Community Center. But I think the thing that I love most about their story is it really reflects so much of what I know about philanthropy in Dane County. They lived frugally and they gave big. There was this fantastic article in the paper. I hope I get this exactly right. When Irwin passed away in 2010, and the article in the paper was covering an earlier interview that they had with him about giving and about the Goodman Foundation. And in that previous article, somebody asked him, or observed, well, Irwin, you're driving the same Oldsmobile after 36 years. What about that? and Irwin said, well, if I bought a new car, it would cost me a lot more, and it wouldn't get me to the other side of town any better. But yet Irwin and Bob Goodman gave millions and millions of dollars to this community. And through their foundation now, 6 years after they passed away, they are still giving back to our community. It's a phenomenal story, and it's a story that typifies donors in Madison. So it's one thing to talk about giving, and it's another to talk about impact. And of course, giving and impact are not limited to the Madison Community Foundation. There are many good institutions in our community doing great work. However, I'm going to use the Community Foundation to share just a couple of examples of what philanthropy has accomplished for our community. Together with our fund holders, the Community Foundation gives $10 million per year, and yet we're best known for about 20% of that, giving from our Community Impact Fund. What's cool about that fund is it is the most broadly supported fund we have at Madison Community Foundation. We have had gifts from literally $9.84 to $15,086,000, I think it is. And it really just, when you talk about a community's foundation, that's exactly what you want to see. You want everybody to feel like they're part of it. It is our unrestricted endowment, and it enables us to really pivot as the needs and the opportunities of the community evolve over time. It's got two components to it. The first is on the screen. This is our competitive grant-making process. We review our focus areas regularly and did so in July in the context of 18 other large foundations operating in Dane County. We generally give about 15 to 20 grants away a year through the competitive process. And some recent awards include, for example, $35,000 for One City Early Learning Center for a parent engagement program, $25,000 for Henry Vilas Zoo for the new Badger exhibit, of course, with Bucky Badger, and $40,000 for the exceptional body of work of the Madison Museum Contemporary of Art to digitize that. So that kind of gives you an idea of what that grant-making process is like. The other side of community impact are our proactive grants. These can be up to 50% of the assets that we have available on an annual basis, and they're responsible for some of the most impactful grants that we have given to our community. For example, in 1993, under Jane's leadership, we gave $1 million to kick off the public fundraising portion of Monona Terrace, ending the debate about whether or not we were going to build it and getting it off the ground. It's been a terrific success, and I can speak from personal experience, because in 1997, when it opened, I was executive director of the Wisconsin Chamber Orchestra, and we still produce concerts on the square up on the corner of the state capitol. In 97, we were rolling carts with chairs and tables and staging and everything you can imagine that it takes to put concerts on the square together, except for the concert goers, into the empty storefronts across the street. And we had our pick of empty storefronts across the street. In 2007, when I moved over to the Community Foundation, there were no empty storefronts across the street. We were having to truck in all of our equipment from the perimeter of the city. That is impact. Another example is the Great Performance Campaign. In 1998, after Monona Terrace opened, Jerry Frauchi recognized that the other side of the square could use some help as well. Ultimately, he gave over $200 million to build Overture Center for the Arts. In 2005, as Overture Center was opening, these things take a few years, of course, to get planned and open. His wife, Pleasant Rowland, wanted to ensure the success of the arts organizations using the facility, and she offered a $23 million challenge match to build endowments. Not only did the Community Foundation give $600,000 for that, but we led the campaign to raise the other $22.4 million and successfully achieved that. What's been the impact? Well, for Monona Terrace, they brought the stores. For Overture Center, it brought the condos. Overture Center is a symbol of the quality of life people are looking for when they want to move downtown. And when you think about, well, what does this mean for the citizens of our community? Of course, it limits sprawl, it increases the tax base, it provides more resources for our city and for the citizens who live here. It's really a wonderful story overall. And this is the community story. I'll just give you a couple more quick examples. Let's fast forward to 2015. The Community Foundation provided funding to launch Madison Metropolitan School District's Community Schools Initiative. Probably the second most popular question I've gotten recently is, what's a community school? Community schools, with the program, you identify areas that are not served by community centers. Then you identify schools in those areas that are familiar to the population you want to serve. You place services at those schools. The population gets the services they need at a place that is convenient for them, because transportation is a major issue, and their family life is improved. And what happens when you improve your family life? Your kids do better in school. It is correlated time and again. And so I'm not claiming impact yet for community schools. It's 2017, that was in 2015. But I want you to know your Madison Metropolitan School District used best practices in identifying this as a solution to closing the achievement gap. We've launched it at Leopold and Mendota, and it is certainly a promising program and has worked well in other places. And finally, I think one of the fun parts of proactive giving is it allows you to throw some spaghetti at the wall. Many of you were at our Madison Gives dinner in May, and at it we announced a grant to fund a feasibility study for a project that would transform John Nolan Drive. Lack of access to our waterfront is one of the #1 issues that citizens of our community talk about. And I used to be on the Convention and Visitors Bureau board, and it was the #1 issue for visitors coming to Madison. You know, they think they're coming, they're going to be around the lakes all the time, and they just don't have that kind of connection. So this plan would provide acres of waterfront parkland in an environmentally friendly way. It would hide U.S. Highway 151 and juxtapose two of Frank Lloyd Wright's famous designs. One of his first, which was the Monona Boathouse, which he designed in 1893, and one of his last, which he designed in 1938, Monona Terrace. So it took us about 60 years to build Monona Terrace. The clock is still ticking, and it's 124 years for the boathouse, but we'll get there. So it's a long shot, but the proactive grant making through the Community Impact Fund enables our community to dream big, and it's very exciting to have a part in that. So, speaking of good, this last slide lets me drill down a bit. If you want to see the face of philanthropy in Madison, all you need to do is look in the mirror. I am not flattering you. The numbers bear this out. As a group, Rotarians are exceptionally generous. If you remember earlier, 34% of tax returns in Dane County showed contributions in 2016. Last year, 88% of our club members gave to the annual fund drive, and I doubt this is the only place you give. After all, giving defines us as Rotarians. The four-way test promotes the welfare of others. That's who we are as people and who we are as a community of Rotarians. Our Madison Rotary Foundation has $11.6 million. Last year, it gave out just over $685,000. It was like $685,856, I think, and I was going to round it to 666, but I thought, well, that's not a good thing to say in a speech for sure. But it's a magnificent sum. And Rotary International gave $220 million for causes across the globe. Every single day, we are part of a network for good across the world. You've heard these numbers before, but they bear repeating, especially for our guests and our staff. 35,000 clubs with 1.2 million members in 200 countries across the world. It's not governments that are working to eradicate polio, it's Rotarians. And for those of you who contribute to the Rotary International Fund, the day is not too far off when we are going to eradicate polio, and you're going to look in the mirror and know you were part of it. This is the legacy that you want to leave for your community. And on that, we're really excited to be able to do the work that we do at the Community Foundation. It didn't take me 90 minutes to get through this, but I tried to stick to my 30, so I'd be happy to take any questions that anybody has. And I guess we're going to open it up at this point.
Bob, back here. Thank you. That's wonderful. One thing you didn't mention, I know has been in the news, is the Madison Public Market. So how is the Madison Community Foundation getting involved with the proposed Madison Public Market?
Well, it's a little bit of a wait and see. We did fund 2 feasibility studies for the Madison Public Market, both of which suggested it should be downtown. One said the Bradenton lot, just on the Near East Side, East Washington. The other one was part of Judge Doyle Square. So I think we're interested in seeing what the model turns out to be. You know, typically public markets in major cities across the U.S. are more tourist destinations than they are, you know, everyday places to go shopping for citizens of a community. So we're excited about it. We think it could be interesting. You know, East Washington is right there. So perhaps, you know, it will see some activity from East Washington around lunchtime and things like that. But we want to know more about this model, and maybe it'll be a precedent-setting model for a different kind of public market in the U.S. But we've been interested, we've been part of the conversations, and we've participated thus far through those feasibility studies.
Bob, what accounts for the state's relatively abysmal showing comparative to other states in terms of philanthropy, and what have you identified as strategies to change that?
Well, I can't speak at the state level in terms of what accounts for the poor giving at that level. You know, I think about it more philosophically, and we can do some research and find the specific answer for you, Stu. I think it tends to be, well, I'll say in Utah, you have a culture through the Mormons of giving and tithing, and so I think part of it plays in religion. I think part of it is culture. I think many of us grew up in very frugal, let me tell you, with a capital F in my case, frugal households of Germans and Scandinavian. But I don't have the answer for you as to why we are where we are.
Thanks for your comments, Bob, and congratulations on 75 years. Do you have any perspective on the current administration's stated plan to eliminate the federal estate tax, and what impact do you think that might have on philanthropy?
Well, we're actually operating at 2 levels, one at the state level, one at the federal level. At the state level, we are working to introduce legislation through the Wisconsin Philanthropy Network to, it's called Endow Wisconsin. And what it would be is the state tax credit. It would provide a state tax credit of up to 25% of gifts that you make, up to, I think, $1,000 would be the individual level, $2,000 for a couple. At the federal level, we're actually more focused right now on donor-advised funds, because what's happening in the state, in the Senate, sorry, the federal level, the Senate and the House, is there's confusion about what a donor-advised fund is. So a donor-advised fund at a community foundation is a very different animal than a donor-advised fund at a commercial gift fund. And the government is saying, well, we have all these dollars flowing into these donor-advised funds, but we're not seeing a lot of them flow out. And that's true in the case of some of these commercial gift funds. That's not true at community foundations. And so I was actually out in D.C. on May 24th. I had 9 meetings with members of the House, and we were talking about and just trying to introduce them to the concept of a community foundation, the concept of an endowment, the fact that we do give out on an annual basis, and to suggest, rather than some sort of mandatory payout over a period of 5 to 10 years, that we do sort of an inactive fund policy. So we say, okay, we want to make sure that funds that are designed to be giving back to the community on an annual basis do that. And so we're going to implement policies to encourage our fund holders to give, to perhaps put a cap on the number of years that you can go without a distribution, et cetera. Regarding the estate tax, we haven't been talking a lot about that because we're sort of dealing with the donor-advised funds first.
Bob?
Yeah.
Hey, Bob, Egan Heath, thanks for the millennial shout out. We appreciate that.
84% right there.
There've been a number of books over the last decade or so kind of problematizing charity and sort of the effect it has on the other side. So I'm curious just to hear you talk about how do we move from measuring the dollars given to the actual impact?
This is a great question. In fact, I had a whole nother slide. When I said 90 minutes, I could have gone 90 minutes, but I had another slide as I was doing research on philanthropy. There were, and it was part of the article that talked about there being $20 trillion in giving in the U.S. in the next 50 years. It talked about the downside of philanthropy, which is that and it is easy to be philanthropic, but it's also easy to get people off the mark. When you are giving a $100 million gift and you don't have a lot of information to back up what you're doing, and I'm not trying to pick on charter schools or whatever it may be, oftentimes it's in education that these things come in, but you have these enormous sums of wealth concentrated in very few hands, and it enables people to pivot in ways, and not necessarily with the information they need, to really impact our society in big ways. Is that getting at what you were asking?
Yeah, I think so. I was also thinking of development work in other countries and things like that. We've seen things move to microloans and things like that, of trying to use markets for good rather than dumping free goods on local markets and causing problems for farmers.
Right. There is a lot more movement around micro lending. The sewing machine project is a great example of that in the Madison area. It's fairly an unregulated area of philanthropy. I think we're going to see more giving because it gets to the point of you can do a lot with a little money. Some friends of ours live in La Crosse. Their son Jesse passed away. They started raising money to put wells in countries in Africa. It's about $2,000 for a clean water well. And so they get on a plane, they go over. His pictures on these wells in probably 20 communities now. They're doing a magnificent thing, but they're just going and doing it. It's interesting to see how what a wide range of activities there are and can be. And I think there is a downside sometimes when there are unintended consequences of generosity, either because people don't know what they're doing, how their philanthropy is going to impact the population they're trying to serve, and or make them dependent versus independent. There are all sorts of pieces to that.
Okay. This is not a setup. And Bob is going to look embarrassed.
Oh, my goodness.
But I simply can't sit here any longer and look at that first item there without mentioning to you that in our 75th year, we have a goal, and as Bob said, I'm doing some volunteer work on this, as is Carol, to get 75 new legacy funds. A legacy fund is simply an indication from a donor that they will remember the community foundation in their will. It does not have to say how much, it does not have to say in what form, and it is revocable. However, we want to celebrate our 75 years with 75 new ones. We're up to 49, and I have to tell you that a member of our group is very generously matching each new legacy gift that we get with $1,000. So if we make it to 75, we will have all of those plus 75 new dollars in cash for the impact fund. So should you be interested, and how could you not, please feel free to ever contact me or Bob or Dave or anybody over there at that table, and you'll probably think twice before you let me come again.
Thank you, Jane. I'll pay a fine for that.
Yeah. One more over here. Bob, I'm curious to know how the Madison Community Foundation is addressing the issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. To me, it's probably the biggest issue in our community, and I'd like to hear about the level of awareness and how, particularly with opportunistic giving, you're thinking or not thinking about these issues.
Sure. So, the Community Foundation has been addressing issues of race equity for years. We've given $3.25 million in 65 grants over the last 15 years. I was cutting it down because that was another slide I was putting in. We've given $10.1 million in 45 grants for the specific effort to address race inequality. Apart from that, and in addition to that, we have given multiples more to address poverty, and of course, unfortunately, populations of color are disproportionately represented and correlated to poverty. But about 40% of our giving over the last decade has gone to job training programs, to things that help people pull themselves out of poverty. So as I said, $2.1 million in the last 10 years for 45 programs. We are, as an institution, diversifying our board and staff. 4 years ago, we didn't have any people of color on our board. We are doing this all in authentic ways. About a quarter of our board now are people of color. And so we're trying to look in the mirror as we look at our community and to say, what do we do and how are we trying to strengthen the Community Foundation and reflect what we want to see in the community. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Bob, so much. And just as we close, please keep the people in Houston and Louisiana in your thoughts and prayers. We are adjourned.